Our final presenter is Calvin Johnson, who's head of commercial at Proton Technologies. He has 30 years of commercial risk and capital markets experience in oil, gas, refined products, renewables, emissions, power, and financial sectors. He's responsible for a number of areas, including the commercialization of hydrogen at Proton, including hydrogen sales, long-term contracting, market development, hedging, and risk management. Proton Technologies is a company focused on low-cost, zero-emission hydrogen production. Their patented technologies convert hydrocarbon reservoirs into hydrogen production, leaving all the carbon and other pollutants in the ground. And here is Calvin.
So thank you, Paul, and thank you to the Hydrogen Business Council for allowing us to present today. So Proton Technologies is a clean tech company that is really focused on low-cost generation of hydrogen. We're well along in our commercial phase in terms of producing hydrogen. The genesis of the company came out of the University of Calgary, and in terms of looking at how hydrogen is sort of produced out of existing oil and gas reservoirs. The unique thing about our technology is that it utilizes existing infrastructure to produce large amounts of hydrogen at scale very, very cheaply. It's a quick path to decarbonization. There's really not a lot of infrastructure to put in place. It has the ability to turn energy resource liabilities into assets. And it's a staggering resource potential when you look at the remaining oil in place that's left behind in oil and gas reservoirs. Essentially, our technology takes the H out of the hydrocarbons and leaves everything else behind. Our technology is this is a gross simplification of our technology, but essentially it's been patented in over 100 countries around the world. We're already licensed it, I think, to about 9 countries. In Australia, they're moving ahead with it very, very quickly. Our technology has been proven in the lab, it's been simulated, and it's been field proven. Essentially what we do is find old oil and gas reservoirs, and then we oxidize those reservoirs. And essentially it goes through a whole series of reactions, and then we're able to drill a hydrogen recovery well and use our technology to recover the hydrogen. It's very favorable from a energy balance perspective. We can get completely on a closed hydrogen loop, and we can paint the hydrogen molecules completely green, and it becomes sort of a self-sustaining hydrogen production loop, if you will. The resource potential is very significant in terms of the potential for it. We ran some numbers just basically using the oil sands alone, and the hydrogen potential is probably enough to supply hundreds of years of energy for all of Canada's total primary energy supply. So there's a staggering resource potential in terms of oil and gas reservoirs. And as people who are familiar with the oil and gas industry, most of the oil is left behind, or the resource is left behind. The company was founded in 2015. We did a successful lab demonstration. We acquired some assets out of bankruptcy, essentially a liability. Started to deploy our technology. We did some demonstrations in the field in terms of our recovery technology. And effectively, we are in the process of adding a generation set in place to be able to produce into a PPA that's going to kick in probably starting in the springtime. We're currently in negotiations to sell large amounts of hydrogen at scale. And we're going to start probably trucking some of that out. Most of it will go into our generation set, but we'll probably start producing spot volumes in 2021. In terms of what our production looks like, our current production, we're producing hydrogen probably somewhere in the neighborhood of about $1. I would say it's about $1 a kilogram. And as we scale our plant up, it's going to drop considerably down to well under, Canadian 50 cents a kilogram. If you compare our cost structure relative to a lot of the other technology, and certainly some of the other presenters have presented the numbers, our cost structure is considerably lower because we effectively don't require all the expensive capital that's required to do steam methane reformation. Our resource is basically sitting under the ground. And all of our numbers are really just based on hydrogen generation alone. It's not based on any environmental attributes that would be attributed to increased hydrogen production. In terms of what our cost structure looks like relatively, we're currently, once we scale up, we'll be able to produce it for well under 50 cents US a kilogram. And that's kind of a quick snapshot of what our CapEx and OpEx looks like. Our current cost structure right now is probably somewhere, I said, in the neighborhood of probably about $1 Canadian per kilogram, and dropping as we just start to scale up. What we're in the process of doing now is finding at scale large hydrogen buyers, multiple applications, multiple demand layers. I think one of your prior speakers had mentioned that there's immediate opportunities for the oil and gas sector to start decarbonizing, the whole energy sector, frankly, to start decarbonizing. And the good news about our technology is we don't have to wait for fueling stations or other things to get built out. We can do it today. We can do it tomorrow. Whether that's methane blending into gas and power, ammonia. One byproduct of our production is actually nitrogen. So we can combine hydrogen and nitrogen and use ammonia either as production in the fertilizer sector or as an energy carrier. And then obviously there's petrochemical feedstocks, and then the upstream oil and gas industry. And then the long term is really opportunities to do synthetic fuels and synthetic refining, medium and heavy transportation. So we're working on trying to commercialize a lot of that, and it all boils down to being able to find, frankly, large buyers of hydrogen. So anyone who wants to raise their hand, you can take 500 to 1,000 tons a day of hydrogen. That's kind of what we're in the market to sell. So in a nutshell, that's our presentation.
Okay, so and that sounds very good. And how will Proton's technology immediately impact the hydrogen markets? What are you thinking that your impact is going to be?
I think initially it's probably going to be disruptive. Well, it's going to be two things. It's very disruptive from a cost perspective, and it's very scalable. And so I think initially it's basically going to have an impact on the cost structure for hydrogen and hydrogen production, both whether that's through existing SMR or whether it's through renewables plus electrolysis. And a lot of the learning curves and the rights law and all that sort of stuff, we expect to benefit from that as well. As we scale up our technology, we'll be able to probably decrease per unit costs. We haven't factored any of that into our analysis, but that's obvious that will happen. So I'd say the immediate impact is basically going to be costs, and it's going to allow the industry to immediately start to decarbonize. And it's probably also going to help, in some respects, the upstream oil and gas sector convert what could be liabilities into potentially assets. So we've already proven that you can do that.
Okay, so in the challenges that you're facing for the real scale up around the world, what's sort of like your number one challenge for that?
I'd say the number one challenge right now is I think the ecosystem for hydrogen is here and it's real. But I think one of your prior speakers had mentioned it. We're waiting for the regulators to catch up. We're waiting for the regulators to set the rules for methane blending into natural gas pipelines and distribution systems. There's a lot of low-hanging fruit that can be capitalized immediately. So I'd say the biggest obstacle at this stage in Canada is probably the regulatory environment. In Europe, it's moving fast. I would say in Australia, it's moving fast. And we're looking at licensing and other arrangements in those markets. But I'd say as far as Canada goes, we're waiting for the regulators to catch up to how fast the industry is moving.
Okay, that's great.